we had a little bit of a setting of the stage around AI, but I think we all recognize in our daily conversations how AI really enters into our world on a daily basis in many facets now. So this discussion is going to be moderated by Alex Wolf, the Dean of the Baskin School of Engineering at UC Santa Cruz. Joining him in the panel discussion will be Ravi Rajamani, Managing Director, the Global Head of AI Black Belts at Google, Arun Kumar, Managing Director of Celesta Capital, Vineet Agarwal, Vice President of AIMA and a Managing Director of the Transport Corporation of India, Yi Zhang is the Director of the Center for Generative AI at UC Santa Cruz, and Sharad Singh, CEO of Trivium. So, Alex, turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, John. I think the discussion that we just had and the questions that came up really teed up some of the issues that we'd like to explore in this panel. The panel, although it says AI, we're going to focus more on the current geopolitical context in which artificial intelligence has become a race. And not so much on the existential questions or the technical questions, and let's say the existential questions of artificial general intelligence or even superintelligence. But that context is very important. And the theme is the race and the rules. So let's start with the race. And what really defines the race? And in my opinion, there are 4 primary elements and 1 scary element, maybe. Maybe they're all scary. Access to AI talent, access to advanced computational resources, access to training data, dominance in the marketplace or in market segments, and finally, the final element of the race that I see is dominance in the economic or territorial battlefields. I think we will not talk so much about that last one, but I think it's important to recognize that there is an AI race in the territorial battlefield. So let's start. This is a big topic. We have very little time. US and China are clearly leading in the race to build the AI stack. The AI stack being everything from the new materials that are used to produce chips, to the chips themselves that run the algorithms, the invention of the algorithms, all the way up to the various technologies that are being presented to companies, being presented to individuals. And it's pretty clear that the US and China are leading in that. So I guess the first question really is, what role can India play? Given that so far it's been a relative bystander in this part of the race. Is there a leverage that India can apply in this situation? Is being kind of the third party an advantage even for India, or does it hurt India? So I'm open to anyone answering these questions, but maybe I'll ask Ravi to start.
I mean, and the way I see it, fundamentally, if you look at AI, there is that foundational research element, yeah? I think that there's a lot of academia, funding that goes along with it, the ecosystem around it. China's built a fantastic ecosystem in the last 10 years. Obviously, US should be the leader, and they are the leader, at least today, right? Then you look at applied AI. So how do you take some of this foundational research and apply it to products? And I'm not going to talk about what we do at Google, but in general, I think for folks in India, I think that's a wide green world right now, right? I mean, I think taking some of the research areas and applying it to everyday life, everyday jobs, I think is that's an arms race that everybody should get in at this point. The question that you asked in terms of all these are available, like people, computational power, data. I mean, you look at it, India doesn't lack any of that, honestly. Maybe the latest and high-end chips, for sure. But that takes 10, 15 years to build a semiconductor ecosystem, yeah? I mean, if you look at a lot of the VCs today, taking research papers and reverse engineering that is majority what all these startups are doing. So Google puts out a paper, OpenAI puts out a paper, people immediately try to do it in open source and reverse engineer. It's actually a really, really good thing, by the way, trust me, because it democratizes research also, right? So we have to start, India has to start, in my opinion, at the university level, at the research level for that. But applied AI, I think, is everybody should go very, very quickly.
So in terms of India's advantage in that, or in India's advantage in dominance in any particular market segment, would you like to
I just want to
comment?
build on what Ravi said, which I completely agree with. I also was wondering, I also think there would be other opportunities, like, AI is driving a lot of demand in a number of areas. So if you look beyond the stack, there's many edge cases, applications were mentioned, but there could also be, semiconductor circuits, systems for specialized users. So a number of areas where we'll see potential opportunities for Indian innovative companies to take a lead.
Yeah, I guess I'm not the technical expert you are, but sorry, I had a rough weekend in Vegas this weekend, so bear with me on this. It was a good weekend in Vegas. But I was thinking, like, the Indians. I was born here, but as an Indian, I think what I've been amazed by our people has been the ability to win hearts and minds and lead companies. That we just had these stats that we went through about how many are founders. I think that's where India can lead, be that glue in the middle of all these rivaling countries. We kind of have a little specialty of having tea with people, joking around, giving them sweets, and everyone getting warm together. And I think maybe we can be that culture that's the warm and fuzzy of AI that brings everyone together.
So although I'm not India, but I think Indian country can contribute a lot. If you look at the data, data can influence what AI knows, defines what's intelligence. And you don't want data come from a particular place. And India can contribute data to influence intelligence for the future, for the global world. And also India has talent, right? And you can also contribute there. I heard the Consulate General are talking about computing powers. I expect the country will have computing powers to also contribute to models and innovation in the future.
Yeah, I'll actually take a step back and not, it's just addressing a larger question here, which is, it's firstly not, the race is not a marathon. It's more like a sprint right now. It seems like that, at least. And the sprint is not just towards what we're talking about from a delivery perspective, but take a step even further down. It starts with rare earth. The absence of rare earth, and then the absence of the hardware, which is the chips, and the absence of the ecosystem. All of those things are essential to say that, yes, we are part of that race. So first, to enter the race, I think some of these basic things need to be in place. And we've entered the race from the outside. We were not in the race, but we've come from the outside. So somewhere we have to also look at very strongly contribute using our skills as a nation, get that advantage quickly. And I think all the points that was mentioned were the things that we can really take and drive forward.
I think it's fair to say that one characterization of the success of the success of the U.S. in the AI race has been its welcoming of people from many, many nations and bringing in talent from anywhere. China's success might be attributed to its very controlled, centralized, deliberate investment in very specific areas and very intensively. Of course, it has set up a competitive environment among many, many companies, but generally speaking, it's been a very deliberate strategy from a central source. how does India, what is the stake that India has in this, or what is the take that India makes? I mean, the talent that India draws upon is mainly Indian talent. How does it develop that talent? How does it develop these resources?
If I might start with that from a private sector point of view. Is that working?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a tremendous amount of entrepreneurship and innovation happening in India today. And the US-India connection is very, very powerful. People in Bangalore speak the same language as people here in Silicon Valley. They went to the same schools often. They know each other. So that's an element that I would not underestimate. We see a lot of action. For example, you mentioned data. You mentioned data. Now, there are companies in India that are building, and we involved some of them, that are in code-developing products in the pharma and diagnostics area with their US counterpart. Again, building on the vast amounts of data that you can gather in India. So there are many synergies to be found. So the private sector, in terms of entrepreneurship, is very active. I would also say that the government is stepping forward. The government has realized that deep technology is really important, that AI is really important, that semiconductors are important. They've set up the India Semiconductor Mission with private sector participation as advisors and so forth. They've got an AI mission. And they recently announced a $12 billion fund to provide actually quite soft money to incent investment in deep technology. So the government is playing a catalytic role. They don't want to really interfere with markets, but they do want to support deployment of resources through competitive means.
Well, I think fundamentally you're going to have two sort of AI stacks, right? One is a Western stack, and another one is a China stack. Now, possibly an open source stack, right? So if you look at India, the options are, I mean, obviously geopolitically, you're not going to go and standardize on a China stack. So you're going to go with the Western stack and maybe an open source stack, right? Now, open source is super interesting right now because first off, I don't believe transformers, the architecture that most LLMs are based off of today, is going to get you nearly to AGI, let alone ASI, right? So what are the new architectures that are going to come up? And then what's open source going to do? I mean, it's not clear proprietary models are here to stay forever for all use cases, for all domains, right? I mean, there is a place and time for open source. Maybe that's an area where India can, step in. To the point made earlier about the government support, yeah, it has to start there, right? I mean, it has to be a public/private partnership because DeepSeek did not come out of someone saying, oh, I have this great idea. They were forced. That was an innovation that came really because of need. They did not have access to the latest NVIDIA chips. US was embargoing that. So they had the older version of chips and said, how do I still train? So it was necessity, right? I mean, they had to do that. So no reason why India cannot do that. But we have to set up the infrastructure. There has to be power. Power is the biggest constraint these days. It's not even chips anymore. It's power, it's data center. Like, where do you put it? I mean, those are things, as he was saying, maybe, the government can step in and help the private enterprises.
Okay, great, thank you. So getting sort of looking at a different part of the landscape here in terms of a race. There's the question of you mentioned open source as a way of making these technologies available, but I think it's fair to say that the technology is moving extremely rapidly. The way that you use AI or the infrastructure for leveraging AI is changing, weekly, practically. And so it's very hard to be competitive in an environment where the base infrastructure shifts so quickly. And it's compounded, I would say, by the fact that it's not only moving quickly, it's also somewhat mysterious in the sense that even AI developers themselves don't know why the technology works. They don't really understand how it is able to do what it does. They know that it's doing what it does, and they know how to make it do better and more, but they don't understand it in a fundamental sense that that leads to other properties like confidence and security and reliability that we look for in products. So is it possible for companies, is it possible to develop technically or practically some sort of black box approach to AI foundations that can insulate companies from this rapid change, from the vagaries of different sorts of foundational infrastructures that will allow those companies to actually flourish in a marketplace?
I can go, but I'll let the other panel.
It's your expertise, exactly.
Okay. So another way to ask that question, the way I internalize it, is what's the impact of regulations too, right? Because you're asking for, are we going to be in a world where there are standards? That's what really future-proofs. So, I mean, you look at open interfaces like Linux, everybody can, step on it because it's, at the end of the day, open source, right? I mean, open interfaces. A lot of people know cricket here. I mean, this is probably the first or second over in a really long game, right? So it's too early to, start regulating around standards, in my opinion. Now, there is also, if you look at the latest European, IT Act around AI, they said, I'm not going to regulate the tech, but I'm going to regulate the application of the tech. It's a nuanced difference, but it is very, very important, right? So if I'm using an AI model to, let's say, determine whether a loan application should be approved or not, I can certainly, regulate that, right? By saying you need to explain, to your point, why the AI model made a certain recommendation that it made. So can I go back and check whether there was bias in the data or was there bias in the network layer itself, right? So those are things that you can, but if you start regulating, saying everybody has to be a standard today, it's going to be, I mean, even companies, I talk to companies day in and day out, right? I mean, that's the number one concern, by the way. If I pick a stack, am I going to future-proof myself, right? So we do try to help customers by giving them how you run it at scale, because creating a demo or a prototype today with AI really is a couple of hours these days, depending on the use case. I mean, maybe a day, 2 days, right? But running it in production is a whole different ballgame. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to push back a little bit and say, I think the race is actually to build the de facto standard,
Right.
not the regulated standard. I mean, that's a different thing, but the de facto standard. And people are racing to be that standard.
Again, there's just a nuance. I agree with you, right? But if you regulate now, you might create a hurdle for these new entrants in the market that might be too big for them to cross, right? Then you are standardizing the existing players. Now, it works for my employer and a few other big ones. But is that what we want for AI, right? I mean, if you want to unleash that innovation, it's too soon to regulate or too soon to expect standards. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
It's too soon to expect standards. But then what is a company supposed to do? What is a company supposed to do in that environment in which it needs to future-proof itself, it needs to enter the markets, and it needs to align itself with the current expectations of their customers and users, and depending on the product. So I really feel a conflict here where this is a technology, as you say, that's in some sense is really, it was certainly immature. It may be premature. But there's such pressure in the world to align companies, align products, align workforces with this technology.
We're in the finance, for startups business. So let's take. I'm just gonna take a little sliver of this world and how it might be. Maybe it's different. Everyone right now is on QuickBooks and they go to NetSuite. That's kind of the de facto, right? And NetSuite's a $40 billion company. The way they make money, I'm not sorry if anyone works for NetSuite, but you buy it and you spend $100,000 and every module you add, let's just say you got revenue, you add a revenue module, they charge you, right? In the last 6 months, I've probably seen 75 companies that are just doing accounts receivable modules. And it's all AI. And you could see a company the other day, I got preempted on the investment. Rillet raised 20 million from Sequoia. 6 weeks later, they raised $100 million from Andreessen. And all they're doing is trying to just take a chunk of what NetSuite's doing. And there's a ton of these companies, and all these companies are built on AI, and they're talking to each other. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to have, instead of one big behemoth and a bunch of modules they sell you, or they charge you to, connect with them, there's going to be a ton of options. So on the other side is maybe we have more options as company owners. Maybe we're more agile. Everything speaks to each other. And it's so smart that it's plug and play, and the best of the breed wins.
I'd like to invite the audience, if you have questions now, please.
My question is, I know you talked about application.
Can you wait for the microphone?
Application,
Yeah.
that is important because you can have all the theory, all the fundamentals. But the thing is, when you do the application, and the most important thing, I think Mrs. Zhang brought up that idea of data. Without data, you cannot solve the problem. And you got to have data, accurate data. Now, I hear about even the Gen AI has some problem because if the data is not accurate, you may get a wrong result. It's called hallucination. How do you take care of that? Because you got without India particularly, how do you get the source of all the data to apply AI in different applications?
I mean, you talked about hallucination. First off, it's called generative AI, and I would argue hallucination is a bug for some of us. It's a feature for others, right? Because if I'm trying to create a script for a movie, I want it to hallucinate. I want it to kind of go bonkers, right? Depending on what I want. I can set temperature. I could do whatever I want. Or if I'm figuring out, let's say, a supply chain where I need to route it, obviously I need to be super mission critical, and it has to be grounded in facts, right? There are lots of architectural techniques now in the industry that can help you manage this, right? And going back to his earlier question, how many of you here, a lot of successful companies, how many of you here are not considering AI today, like not even evaluating AI? Yeah, that's what I was expecting, right? So I think expecting perfection today is foolhardy, right? You have to get going. And I always tell this stat. Sundar Shah shared this in our last quarterly results. Like 30% of Google's code now is generated by AI, right? It doesn't mean we are laying off 30% of our developers. That's not what we are saying. But 1 out of every 3 lines of code that goes into our code base is either suggested by AI or generated by AI, right? Now, 100% of those code reviews are done by human beings today at Google. So we are not ready to say, software developers, you don't need to, AI is going to come in and take over. But if a code was written by a human being, we would have someone review the code, right, before we put it into our main branch. It's the same thing with AI also, right? So the question then for you is to say, how much can I take and let it go versus how much do I want to go through my existing sort of QA, QC process, right? Over a period of time, you are going to build that trust with AI. So you obviously don't want to be in 2 extremes. 100% trust AI or I don't trust AI at all. So you have to be somewhere in the middle, and that journey is dependent on where you are as a company, right? Like how much risk you're going to take putting an AI into this.
Okay. Yi, would you like to?
Yeah, as a researcher in AI, and I also, yesterday we organized an AI conference here, right here on this stage. The whole panel are AI experts. The conclusion is don't trust AI. Because that's how AI is trained by training data, and it has objective to make user happy. Because how it's trained, it try to achieve that particular goal. And then it's not controlled by ethics, responsibility, trust, and so on. So AI could do harm when it tries to reach its goal. It's not surprising we see AI trying to persuade kids to commit suicide. If you try enough, you will find AI will try to let you divorce if you have a conflict between your spouse. And AI will try to persuade you to do bad things. because it's trying to achieve its goal to make user happy. Not necessarily do good things to make you like it. So that make it really important. We, as human species, be careful about AI. Although we are excited about the new startups in revenues, companies, and so on, but as a human race, we need to pay attention. And we do need to, I do think we need to regulate to some extent, and auditing. It's like doctors, lawyers, teachers, they need certificates in order to do the job. While the AI can do it without any control. And that's my...
No, I mean, I am for regulation. I think officially we have said that. It's where do you regulate?
But I think there are, like the NIST framework, the evolving frameworks in Europe, etc., do try to address these kinds of issues. They try to address, they want ethical, fundamentally they want AI to be ethical. They are sensitive to the human and human rights issues. So I think the consensus is developing along those directions. Now, they've got to be adopted adequately.
Yeah, what he mentioned is called emergent misalignment. So actually, I have two questions, both for Ravi, so you're on the hook. So first is, you mentioned that LLMs won't take us to AGI, and I agree with you. What would? So that's the first question. And second question is, when I think about the stack, I think about the sort of the fundamental layer, a lot of sort of research, academic research that needs to go into it. Then this foundational layer, LLMs, etc., and then the applied layer, okay, applications, etc. Where do you think India can actually really, succeed, and then truly innovate? Thank you.
Listen, you're asking what's coming after Transformers as the basic. Yeah. I think it's still TBD, right? But I think fundamentally, if you look at an LLM, how does it learn, right? Through words, right? It figures out, the mapping, and essentially it just learns the relationships between words, and then it's a statistical sort of probability that it generates, saying, okay, say this word, what is the next word, right? But that's not, you take a child, that's not how a child learns. I mean, it's multimodal by definition, right? So if a baby is going to put the hand next to a candle, it burns, they know next time they're not going to do that, right? Nobody said, candle put, right? I mean, it was not through words, it was actually through experiential, experiences that you learn. We have to figure this thing out. So if you look at Gemini today, pretty much it can do all the multimodality, right? So we announced a new image model called Nano Banana. It can do image editing in place, it can do a lot of things, and it's actually an LLM, to be honest, right? It was not a separate model that was trained just for images, right? So the core LLM is getting very, very powerful these days. But is it going to take us to AGI in the current architecture? Just my personal feeling, not Google's. It's just my personal feeling. I don't think we will get there, right? But there's going to be so many architectural things that we could do to make it look like, I mean, you would argue today LLMs can do more than human beings, right? But it's because I can have an LLM talk 100 languages. Very few human beings can do that, right? So just by simple definition, you could say. But that's not what we mean by AGI, though, right? Now, having said that, coming back to India, I think there are lots of nuances, lots of, India is a collection of so many different traditions and cultures, so many different languages. I think there is a time and a place for us to start building what is Indian LLM, right? Even with the current technologies, to the other gentleman's point on data. Right now, we are not able to train a model to go from one language to another language with the empathy and the toning, right? Stuff like that. We could do translations, not a problem. But for us to have truly, AI-based applications, like, building an AI assistant or a tutor or a coach, you need to start conveying that empathy and the sentiment in that native language, right? It's a really hard problem to solve for right now. I mean, you've solved it for some languages, but it still looks very robotic on other languages, right? I think that's the opportunity for us, in my opinion, at least one of them.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
And I also feel that, just to add to that point, is some areas in application, I think India can excel quite well, because the adoption, we have a very, very large base of youngsters in India. I think more than 30% of the population, forget the numbers, but under 25 years and below. So they've already started adopting AI applications in whatever form it is. Maybe the most rudimentary form, but they have started adopting it. And and I'm talking to schools, we are hearing schools saying that we're going to change the pedagogy because we want them to use it more and more. And when such a large base starts using it more and more effectively, the kind of application that can develop can push what he's saying. We'll have a push upward from the LLM side and a push downward from the application side to really converge better.
Okay, I'd like to move us to the rules. I mean, we've kind of been dancing around some rules, but more concretely, the rules I'd like to think about, have us think about, are the rules around the flow of technologies. So the U.S. has had this framework for managing the flow of technologies to other countries, attempting to distinguish between allies and rivals as kind of the way of deciding whether a flow should exist. Biden administration put in new rules for controlling the movement of advanced computer hardware specifically and related software, but also for the movement of AI model weights, which is essentially the output of the training process. So it was moving into a very different realm, interestingly, away from just pure tangible things to more esoteric things like the weights on a training model. Significantly, the rules are also delineated constraints on re-export and transfer between foreign entities. So it tried to, or attempted to a broader geographic reach of how these technologies could flow. The Trump administration essentially rescinded those rules. Could debate the motivations, but to further what it saw as the administration's view of its interests. Basically, it's interested in providing a full stack AI packages to select foreign entities. And so you're seeing these new relationships with countries in the Middle East, particularly, which are trying to transform themselves from the primary source of, say, the old fossil fuel, oil, to the new fossil fuel, computation. Trump administration has also shifted in another way, which is the business of government ownership or stakes in companies, which is not a tradition in the U.S., certainly. It's a tradition in other countries. Rather, and is kind of counter to what we had been doing in the past, which was letting the invisible hand of the market kind of direct where things go. But the government is starting to take stakes in these companies and exercise control. So the question is, how does India deal with this change in sort of structure for how technology flows? How is India positioning itself with respect to the U.S.? I'll observe that, and was very, very present here when Prime Minister Modi joined President Putin and Chairman Xi in a conversation around these technologies. And that was a very important statement, I think, on behalf of India. So how is India navigating this, and how should India navigate this playing field?
Well, since I was once in the U.S. Department of Commerce, I might just take a stab at this. There are a number of joint programs between the U.S. and Indian governments that have been happening for a very long time. Space was mentioned earlier. Just as one example. More recently, in the last couple of years, there's been more conversation about cooperation between the Quad countries. So that's Japan, Australia, US, and India, to try to create joint centers of excellence in critical technology areas. So quantum computing is one of those areas where there's been lots of conversation about coming together. So cooperating, so the Indian option, one good option is cooperating with like-minded, trusted countries, United States and the other Quad countries, for example. And there is some movement. I don't know how far that's gone, and the Consul General here might have much better knowledge about that. But that's one approach. But working together is another. I think the National Science Foundation has had several conversations with India on advancing research and joint research. And I think India took inspiration from the NSF to set up its own National Research Foundation, which has a Hindi name. So I see lots of very interesting cooperative approaches between India and the US.
At the G20 that India hosted last year, there was something called the Delhi Declaration, which talked about how data can be public goods. I think what India has started to contribute towards the whole regulation bit is from a non-homogeneous perspective. Because of the fact that we have such diversity, we are able to bring out different perspectives into how we can view regulation. And also, we've done a lot of work on the public goods side. We have something called Aadhaar and the payment systems, etc. They're all on the India stack. A lot of it is public data. So that itself gives us the confidence that we can say that some of these new regulations that we are proposing as a country should be interesting for other countries to look at as well, and can also become perhaps universal regulations.
So I think where it gets painful, though, is for maybe particularly for global India companies, right, that have to deal with these different regulatory structures. I mean, there's a significant internal market, and one way, of course, is to simply develop that internal market. But if you're a global company, Indian company, you have a different challenge. How is India navigating that? Maybe you should answer that question.
Yeah, but I can't speak on behalf of the Indian government, but yeah. I mean, UPI and the other one, Aadhaar, you said, I mean, those are fundamentally not some groundbreaking innovation that came out, right? I mean, maybe the implementation was great, not maybe, it was great. But you're talking fundamentally where innovation is born, right? Research. So if you look at the three stakeholders, at least the way I look at it, government, private enterprises, and academia. Governments, with this current administration, I wouldn't say they are very friendly right now with anybody, right? I mean, someone said they are running it as a private enterprise, 100%, right? And then private enterprises are profit-driven. So yesterday, one of our researchers who was working on quantum was given the Nobel Peace Prize for Physics. Private companies are picking up the slack in the US. Is that happening in India? I don't have the stats. I mean, you folks might know this. So that's something that we need to figure out. And then more importantly, the researchers, the academic research folks, you have to have free flow of information working with other universities. Is it in China? Is it in Singapore? We need to start building those bridges, because that's how you get into this foundational research. Otherwise, you stay at the application layer, which is good, but you're still dependent on a Western company giving you an LLM or a Chinese company giving you an LLM. That's just one example.
I was just thinking, could India become like the Switzerland of AI, right? Like we have Swiss banks, everyone banked in Switzerland, but bring all these companies in. India has a relationship with all the tech companies, and they all operate out of there. Can they be the facilitator of just transactions between each other? And then bringing a coalition of all these companies to build some sort of, I don't know, an understanding between you guys, Apple, whoever else, Meta, and I don't know, maybe India could lead the charge there.
Alex, were you asking about any specific, for example, data localization, talent migration? These are all big issues.
Yes, these are all big issues. But the technologies themselves are being controlled, right? I mean, there's this, the U.S. is selling its most advanced chips to particular Middle Eastern countries, right? And that is, a very deliberate decision that'll have implications for how, other countries can compete. And I guess the question is, how does one navigate in that, and particularly if you're a global company?
I think the Consul General wanted to weigh in on this.
I think under the new US AI regulations, they said that they will share all AI stack and the chips also with friendly countries. So India is in that group of friendly countries. And see, yesterday I had the opportunity to interact with 70 Indian AI founders, startups. So they were here. So actually, they already have products which they feel that the products are relevant for the US market. So they want to explore the opportunities here, even scale up, and also willing to partner with the local startups and also other companies. So I think we can, India, for OpenAI, India is the second largest market now. We have a lot of users for OpenAI. I think both countries can collaborate. And also India, from the very beginning, is we have this global partnership for AI. So this is a 30-country grouping which is trying to come up with regulations for ethical, transparent, and responsible use of AI. Even India co-hosted a summit in Paris in Feb this year. And we are also hosting the next AI Action Summit in Delhi from 19th to 20th Feb next year. So the basic things we will be discussing there is the impact of AI, how responsibly AI can be used by all countries. Especially, we want to also discuss the divide in AI between developed countries and developing countries, because most of the global South countries, they don't have access to AI. So I think India, I think we are using the opportunity also to discuss these kind of issues, and we also are willing to welcome all the important stakeholders in AI in the Bay Area to participate in the summit in Delhi. Thank you.
Who would like to go?
Thank you. My apologies for asking a second question, but Alex, when you said computation was a fossil fuel, my heart initially, I went boom, and I said, oh my God, maybe we have a clean fossil fuel, but given the electricity demands of AI, that's not true. So my question is more an existential question from this very esteemed panel, and this question I ask not as an economist, but as a mother. Does AI have the potential to solve the climate crisis for us? Does it? I mean, this is anyone who would love to answer. I'd love to hear your views from all or any of you.
I think the first question is whether it can solve its own crisis, right?
So at least in our generative AI center, we have a cluster of professors working on AI for climate sustainability, those things. We are trying to utilize AI.
I mean, the answer is yes, right? I mean, the potential is certainly there. I mean, if you look at some of our, alpha genome models that we just announced, AlphaFold, my bad, genome, coming up. Can we find personalized cure for, intractable diseases? I think it's possible, right? Imagine, a country like India, where you have a teacher for every student, a doctor for every patient. I mean, these are all possibilities that AI can do, right? Now, can we use it for purposes that can destroy this? Sure. I mean, that's with as a civilization, we learned how to regulate fire. Fire is inherently destructive, right? But we learned how to regulate that, right? Without fire, I would argue we don't exist as a civilization. Okay, so now it's more of a hope that we will get the right balance between innovation and regulation. We have to do that. As a society, we have to do that, right? We can't over-regulate this, but there has to be some balanced regulation. And then, how do we work together to go solve some of this? So yeah, you mentioned climate change. Absolutely. That's something that we are, all of us are trying to do this, right? And back to your electricity question, the race now is to go get, nuclear fusion, right? I mean, once you get that, then suddenly every use case becomes, possible. But yeah, I mean, that's why we all have jobs. So we'll go figure that out.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, you I have a very simple question for everybody on the panel. Policy on technology is very hard to do when you're in the government. If you guys want some kicks, watch the Senate hearing on any social media to understand how well they understand and how well they can reform. So it is important that people who are involved, academia, government, experts like yourself, and people who are using applications of AI, like in Transport Corporation or Trivium, to do with this. I spent 25 plus years in SAP and Cisco as a global executive. Capitalist in me is investing heavily. Okay, so I'm very happy. The human in me is shit scared that I'm leaving a scary world for the kids. To give the fire analogy, we didn't give everybody a matchstick and say, now we will not regulate because it will work out. Right now, we're giving everybody a lighter and a matchstick, not telling them what it will do. So there's a difference in the way we need to approach AI. So the trepidation in my voice. Simple question to all five of you, one word each. What would you regulate AI in the next couple of years, 2026 until end of 2026? What would each of you regulate? Just one word each from your perspective.
Misinformation.
You want to go last?
I will go last. I want to see what everybody says.
I guess hallucination.
Yeah, I was also going to say misinformation.
Transparency.
I'm just a moderator.
I think you said transparency, yeah? I would say explainability, right? I mean, or responsible AI. I think that's what I would say. I'm close to what you were saying.
None of these are being regulated today, just FYI, correct?
Well, I think if you look at EU, they have started to do that.
I know. I'm talking about our country and in India in the context of
Not yet. I haven't seen.
So there's extremely heavy push to not regulate these areas. And that's where it's scary.
So we have time for one more question, and then we have to quit.
This actually steps back a bit to sort of the basis of what you were saying. So we've got US and China that are the leaders, there's no question. And China is trying to create its own technology so it's not dependent, this way. How did China get that way? By the government bringing in the best researchers, Chinese researchers, back to China and helping them in every which way. I mean, they leapfrogged. It's amazing. Where is the will in India? I think this is what India has to do. India has a talent. India has no lack of applications. It's not useful to keep on making consumer applications. You've got to build the fundamental research. The only way to do that is with strong government support, policy support, and push. Is there a possibility?
Well,
I think it's happening. I mean, it's slowly happening, but it's happening. I don't want to sound pessimistic because we are eternal optimists when we come from India. So I think it needs to be a lot more. I absolutely agree with you. The ecosystem needs to be 10x'd into whatever we are doing. And I think it's the responsibility of companies, institutions, and of course, I think the pressure is there. The pressure is there, but it's just that it has to be explained and drilled down to government and the entire ecosystem that let's do a lot more.
Okay, I think we need to stop there. I don't know, express a fear or maybe a hope. I don't know which it is, but one could easily observe that the name of this organization could be renamed Artificial Intelligence Management Association. Let's thank our panelists.